What would you do if you discovered your billionaire husband was planning to murder you? Sophia Reynolds thought she had the perfect life, a mansion in Malibu, millions of followers, and a baby on the way. But when she caught her husband proposing to his mistress at a Beverly Hills hotel, everything changed in an instant. One slap from his girlfriend, one viral video, and suddenly, Sophia realized she wasn't just dealing with a cheating husband. She might be married to a killer who had done this before. This is the true story of how a pregnant influencer used social media, her tech mogul sister, and a dangerous game of cat and mouse to expose a murderer and save her own life. But the question is, when you're trapped in a web of lies, betrayal, and deadly secrets, how do you fight back without becoming the next victim? Stay with me, because this story will shock you, inspire you, and prove that sometimes the most ordinary people are capable of extraordinary courage. If this story of survival and justice moved you, hit that like button to support more incredible true stories like this one. Share this with someone who needs to hear about the power of speaking your truth. You never know whose life you might help save. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because we're bringing you more jaw-dropping stories of ordinary people who refuse to be victims. Your engagement helps these important stories reach the people who need them most. What did you think of Sophia's incredible journey? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. Until next time, remember, your voice has power, your story matters, and you're stronger than you know. Sophia Reynolds adjusted her ring light one final time, the massive diamond on her finger catching the California sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Malibu mansion. At 28, she had built an empire of 500,000 Instagram followers who hung on her every perfectly curated word. Today's announcement would change everything. "Good morning, beautiful soul," she said to her phone camera, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I have the most incredible news to share with you all." The Pacific Ocean sparkled behind her like a blue-green jewel, and the $8 million house provided the perfect backdrop for what should have been the happiest moment of her life. Derek had insisted on the mansion when they married 2 years ago, claiming his real estate empire demanded they live in luxury that matched his success. "Derek and I are expecting our first baby," Sophia announced, her voice trembling with genuine emotion. The comments section immediately exploded with heart emojis and congratulations. But she noticed something that made her stomach clench. Where was Derek, as if summoned by her thoughts? Her husband's voice echoed from his home office down the hall, speaking in hushed tones. Sophia wrapped up the live stream quickly, promising a Q&A session later that evening. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. Derek Reynolds, 35 and devastatingly handsome in that sharp-suited Forbes magazine way, had built his fortune buying distressed properties and flipping them into luxury developments. His success was undeniable. But lately, something felt wrong. The late-night phone calls, the new cologne, the way he always kept his phone face down during dinner. "Babe, did you see the announcement?" Sophia called out, walking toward his office. The call ended abruptly as she approached, and Derek emerged with that practiced smile that had once made her heart race. "Of course, sweetheart. Congratulations to us," he said, kissing her forehead with lips that felt cold. "I was just handling some urgent business. You know how it is." But Sophia was beginning to realize she didn't know how it was at all. Her best friend Jessica Torres, who also managed her social media accounts, had been dropping hints for weeks. Comments from a user named Amber Sinclair appearing on Derek's old photos. Venmo charges to restaurants Sophia had never visited. Location tags that didn't match his supposed business meetings. "The announcement already has 50,000 views," Sophia said, studying his face. "Everyone's so excited for us." "That's wonderful, honey. Really wonderful." Derek's phone buzzed, and his eyes immediately darted to the screen. "Listen, I have to run to another meeting. Big investor flying in from New York. You understand?" "Right." Sophia nodded, but understanding and accepting were two different things. As Derek grabbed his keys and headed for his Tesla, she noticed he'd changed his cologne again. This was the third new scent in 2 months. After he left, Sophia found herself scrolling through the comments on her announcement video. Buried among the congratulations was a message that made her blood run cold. Amber Sinclair had written, "Hope he's more faithful to you than he was to me. Congratulations on the baby. Honey." The message was deleted within minutes, but Sophia had screenshot it. Her hands shook as she called Jessica. "Jess, I need you to look into someone for me," she said without preamble. "Amber Sinclair, and I need you to be discreet about it." "Sophia, what's going on?" "I think Derek might be having an affair." The words felt like poison in her mouth. "And I think his mistress just threatened me on Instagram." As the California sun began to set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sophia Reynolds sat in her perfect house with her perfect life and realized that sometimes the most beautiful facades hide the ugliest truths. Jessica Torres had been Sophia's best friend since college, and in the 3 years she'd been managing Sophia's social media presence, she'd developed an eye for digital detective work. What she found about Amber Sinclair made her sick to her stomach. She's 26, blonde, and has an OnlyFans account with over 100,000 subscribers. Jessica reported over coffee the next morning in Sophia's kitchen. "But here's the thing that really bothers me. She's been tagging herself at the same restaurants as Derek for the past 2 months." Sophia's pregnancy nausea hit harder as Jessica showed her the evidence. Photos of Amber at Nobu Malibu on the same night Derek claimed to have dinner with investors. Check-ins at the Beverly Hills Hotel bar during Derek's supposed business trips. "There's more," Jessica continued, her voice gentle but firm. "I traced some of his recent Venmo activity. He's been sending money to someone with the initials AS. For things like spa treatments and shopping." The evidence was overwhelming, but Sophia needed to see it with her own eyes. She'd built her entire life around this marriage, around the dream of having a family with Derek. The thought of it all being a lie was almost unbearable. "I want to catch him," Sophia said finally. "Tonight. He said he has another investor dinner at the Beverly Hills Hotel. I want to see for myself." Jessica looked concerned. "Sophia, you're pregnant. The stress isn't good for the baby. The stress of not knowing is worse." That evening, Sophia chose her outfit carefully. A flowing dress that hid her early pregnancy, minimal makeup, and a baseball cap pulled low. She felt like a spy in her own life, and the irony wasn't lost on her that she was using the same discreet tactics she'd learned from years of avoiding paparazzi. The Beverly Hills Hotel bar was dimly lit and filled with the soft murmur of expensive conversations. Sophia chose a corner booth with a clear view of the main seating area and ordered sparkling water, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She didn't have to wait long. Derek walked in at exactly 8:30, looking confident and relaxed in a way he hadn't at home in months. Behind him, strutting on impossibly high heels, was Amber Sinclair. In person, she was even more stunning than her photo suggested, with platinum blonde hair and the kind of curves that came from expensive personal trainers and possibly surgical enhancement. What happened next would be burned into Sophia's memory forever. Derek and Amber didn't sit at a business table. They didn't order dinner or spread out contracts. Instead, Derek pulled out Amber's chair with the same gallant gesture he'd used on their first date, and then he kissed her. Not a friendly peck, but a deep, passionate kiss that spoke of months of intimacy. Sophia's hands instinctively moved to her stomach, protecting the tiny life growing inside her. She wanted to leave, to preserve what remained of her dignity, but she couldn't move. It was like watching a car accident in slow motion. The worst part came when Derek pulled out a small velvet box. "Derek Reynolds, what are you doing?" Amber's voice carried across the bar, high and excited. "What I should have done months ago," Derek replied, loud enough for half the bar to hear. "Amber, will you marry me?" The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. He was proposing to his mistress while his pregnant wife sat 20 feet away. The cruelty was breathtaking. Amber's squeal of delight drew attention from other patrons, some of whom began filming with their phones. In the age of social media, every moment was potential content. That's when Sophia made her biggest mistake. She stood up. Maybe it was pregnancy hormones, maybe it was righteous fury, or maybe it was just the complete destruction of everything she'd believed about her life. Whatever it was, Sophia Reynolds walked straight to Derek's table. "Congratulations," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I hope she knows you're already married." Derek's face went white, then red, then a sickly shade of green. Amber, however, looked delighted by the drama. "Oh my God," Amber said, standing up and towering over Sophia in her heels. You must be the pathetic wife I've heard so much about. Amber, don't, Derek warned, but it was too late. Did you really think he loved you? Amber continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Honey, he's been complaining about you for months. The boring sex, the constant neediness, the way you've let yourself go. I'm pregnant, Sophia said quietly. And that's supposed to make you special? Amber laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Derek told me all about how you trapped him with that pregnancy, how you probably poked holes in the condoms. The accusation was so outrageous, so divorced from reality, that Sophia actually laughed. That laugh seemed to enrage Amber even more. You think this is funny? Amber raised her hand. The slap echoed through the bar like a gunshot. The slap sent Sophia stumbling backward, her hand flying to her stinging cheek. The entire bar had gone silent, and she could see at least a dozen phones pointed in her direction. In the age of social media, her humiliation was being broadcast in real time. Don't you ever disrespect me again, Amber hissed, her perfectly manicured nails clicking as she pointed at Sophia. Derek chose me. Deal with it. Derek finally found his voice, but not to defend his wife. Sophia, what are you doing here? You're making a scene. The betrayal was complete. Her husband of 2 years, the father of her unborn child, was more concerned about embarrassing his mistress than protecting his pregnant wife. Sophia looked around the bar, seeing the mixture of shock, pity, and barely concealed excitement on the faces watching her. Some were already typing furiously on their phones, uploading videos to TikTok and Instagram. By morning, her humiliation would be entertainment for millions. You're right, Sophia said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I am making a scene, but not the one you think. She pulled out her own phone and opened Instagram Live. Within seconds, her 500,000 followers were watching. Hi everyone, she said, her voice growing stronger. I'm broadcasting live from the Beverly Hills Hotel, where I just caught my husband proposing to his mistress. She turned the phone to show Derek and Amber, both frozen in horror. Say hi to Derek Reynolds, successful real estate mogul, and Amber Sinclair, OnlyFans model and apparently my husband's fiancée. Sophia, stop! Derek lunged for her phone, but she stepped back. The best part is, I'm 12 weeks pregnant with his child, but I guess that doesn't matter when you found someone with bigger tits and lower standards. Amber's face contorted with rage. You crazy bitch! The second slap was even harder than the first, and this time Sophia went down. As she hit the floor, she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen that made her cry out. The bar erupted into chaos. Several patrons rushed to help Sophia, while others continued filming. Someone called 911. Derek tried to explain to anyone who would listen that this was all a misunderstanding, while Amber grabbed her purse and headed for the exit. This isn't over, Amber said as she passed Sophia, who was now sitting on the floor with a cocktail napkin pressed to her bleeding lip. You have no idea who you're messing with. The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later, but by then the damage was done. Videos of the incident were already spreading across social media platforms. The hashtag pregnant wife slapped was trending on Twitter. TikTok videos with titles like Rich Man's Pregnant Wife Gets Slapped by Mistress were racking up millions of views. At Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, doctors confirmed that the baby was fine, but Sophia's blood pressure was dangerously elevated. They wanted to keep her overnight for observation. Derek arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, looking haggard and desperate. Baby, I can explain everything, he said, reaching for her hand. Sophia pulled away. Don't touch me. The Amber thing, it's complicated. Yes, we were seeing each other, but it's not what you think. You proposed to her. Derek, I watched you give her a ring. It was fake, a publicity stunt. She's trying to build her brand, and my being seen with her helps my image with younger investors. The lie was so absurd that Sophia almost laughed. Your image, Derek, you're married to me, and I'm pregnant with your child. I know, and I love you. I love our baby, but you have to understand, appearance is everything in my business. Amber makes me look successful and desirable. And what do I make you look like? Derek hesitated just long enough for Sophia to see the truth in his eyes. Settled, domestic, old. The words hit harder than Amber's slap. This wasn't just an affair. This was a complete rejection of everything Sophia represented in Derek's life. "Get out," she said quietly. "Sophia, be reasonable. Get out." The shout brought a nurse running, and Derek was escorted from the room, alone in her hospital bed. Sophia checked her phone. The videos from the bar had exploded across social media. Her Instagram live broadcast had been viewed over 2 million times. The comments ranged from supportive to cruel, with many people questioning why she'd stayed with Derek if she suspected he was cheating, but it was the direct messages that really hurt. Hundreds of them, many from anonymous accounts, calling her pathetic, desperate, and stupid. Several contained explicit threats. A few were from other women sharing their own stories of betrayal, which somehow made it worse. Jessica arrived at midnight with coffee and a grim expression. "It's bad, Soph. Really bad." "How bad?" "Entertainment Tonight wants an interview. TMZ is offering 6 figures for exclusive details about your marriage. And Derek's lawyer already released a statement saying you have a history of mental health issues and that the pregnancy has made you unstable." Sophia closed her eyes. The man she'd loved, the man she'd built her life around, was now actively working to destroy her reputation. The father of her child was calling her crazy on national television. "There's something else," Jessica said gently. "Your sister called. Madison is flying in from San Francisco." Madison Cross was everything Sophia wasn't. Brilliant, ruthless, and successful beyond measure. She'd built a tech empire before her 30th birthday and been featured on the cover of Forbes twice. She was also fiercely protective of her younger sister. "How much did you tell her?" "Everything. She's not happy." That was the understatement of the century. When Madison Cross wasn't happy, people lost jobs, companies went bankrupt, and reputations were destroyed. Derek Reynolds had no idea what was coming for him. Madison Cross arrived at Cedars-Sinai at 6 a.m. in a black SUV that cost more than most people's houses. At 32, she commanded attention wherever she went, not just because of her success, but because of the aura of controlled power that surrounded her like an invisible force field. She swept into Sophia's hospital room, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit and carrying a tablet, 2 phones, and the expression of someone who was about to declare war. "How are you feeling?" Madison asked, her voice gentle as she kissed Sophia's forehead. "Like my entire life just exploded on the internet." "Good, that means you're ready to fight back." Madison pulled up a chair and opened her tablet. "I've spent the last 6 hours reviewing everything. The social media posts, Derek's financial records, his business associates, and Miss Amber Sinclair's entire digital footprint." "You got Derek's financial records. I have my ways." Madison's smile was sharp as a blade. "And what I found is very interesting. Derek's real estate empire isn't as solid as he claims. He's leveraged to the hilt, and several of his recent projects are hemorrhaging money. He needs investors desperately." "That doesn't explain Amber." "Actually, it does. Amber Sinclair isn't just some OnlyFans model. She's connected to a group of wealthy men who invest in high-risk, high-reward real estate projects. She's essentially a recruiter who uses her looks and social media presence to identify and cultivate potential investors." Sophia felt like she was learning about her husband's life for the first time. So their relationship is actually business. It started that way. But from what I can tell, it became personal very quickly. Derek is an idiot, but he's not stupid enough to propose to a business associate unless he'd completely lost his mind. Madison showed Sophia a series of screenshots from Amber's private social media accounts, photos of expensive gifts, vacation destinations, and intimate moments with Derek that painted a picture of a months-long affair. "The proposal last night wasn't fake. Derek is genuinely in love with this woman, and he's been planning to leave you for her." The words should have hurt, but Sophia felt oddly numb. Maybe she'd used up all her capacity for pain in the last 24 hours. "So what do? We destroy them both." Madison's plan was methodical and ruthless. First, they would leak information about Derek's financial troubles to the business press, destroying his reputation as a successful investor. Second, they would expose Amber's role as what amounted to a high-class escort for wealthy men. Third, they would use Sophia's pregnancy and the public sympathy from the slapping incident to launch a social media campaign that would make Derek and Amber the most hated couple in America. I've already started, Madison said, showing Sophia her phone. Hashtag Stand With Sophia is trending. I've got influencers, celebrities, and women's rights advocates all sharing your story. The narrative is shifting from crazy pregnant wife makes scene to successful woman betrayed by sociopathic husband. The transformation was remarkable. Within hours, public opinion had completely reversed. Amber was being dragged across every social media platform, with people digging up her past controversies and questionable business dealings. Derek's company website was being flooded with negative reviews, and several major investors had already pulled out of his current projects. But Sophia knew her sister well enough to recognize when she was holding something back. What aren't you telling me? Madison hesitated, which was unusual. Her sister never hesitated about anything. There's something else about Derek. Something that goes back to before you met him. What kind of something? He was married before, to a woman named Elena Vasquez. She died in what was ruled an accidental drowning at their house in Malibu 3 years ago. The blood drained from Sophia's face. He never told me he was married before. There's more. Elena had filed for divorce 2 weeks before she died. And she was pregnant. The room started spinning. Sophia gripped the hospital bed rails to steady herself. Are you saying Derek killed his first wife? I'm saying there are some very disturbing parallels between Elena's situation and yours. A pregnant wife discovering her husband's infidelity, a messy public confrontation, and then, Madison's voice trailed off. And then what? Elena's death was convenient for Derek. He inherited everything, including a $2 million life insurance policy. Her family tried to contest the ruling, but Derek had expensive lawyers and they didn't. Sophia's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. You think I'm in danger? I think Derek is a man who's used to getting what he wants. And right now what he wants is to start a new life with Amber. A pregnant wife who knows too much about his business dealings and who's now a public relations nightmare is definitely a problem he needs to solve. The realization hit Sophia like a physical blow. She wasn't just dealing with a cheating husband. She might be married to a murderer. We need to go to the police. With what evidence, suspicious circumstances surrounding a death that was already investigated? They'll think we're desperate and trying to smear Derek because of the affair. Madison was right, but that didn't make the situation any less terrifying. So what do? We be very, very careful, and we make sure that if something happens to you, Derek won't be able to cover it up. As if summoned by their conversation, Derek appeared in the doorway. He looked terrible, with dark circles under his eyes and stubble covering his usually clean-shaven face. Madison, he said with forced politeness, I didn't know you were in town. Somebody tried to hurt my sister. Of course I'm here. Derek's jaw tightened. Amber didn't mean to hurt Sophia. She was just emotional. Emotional enough to assault a pregnant woman in public. It was a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion by social media. Madison stood up, and even though Derek was taller, somehow she seemed to tower over him. Derek, let me be very clear about something. If you or your girlfriend come anywhere near my sister again, I will destroy you. Not your business. Not your reputation. You, personally? Derek tried to laugh, but it came out as more of a cough. Madison, I know you're upset, but threats aren't necessary. That wasn't a threat. That was a promise. After Derek left, Madison turned back to Sophia with renewed determination. We're going to need help. Professional help. What kind of help? The kind that specializes in making problems disappear. Victor Kane was not the kind of man you found through normal channels. A former LAPD detective turned private investigator. He specialized in cases that required what he diplomatically called creative solutions. Madison had used his services twice before, once to expose a competitor's industrial espionage, and once to locate a missing witness in a harassment case. They met him at a coffee shop in West Hollywood, far from the Malibu bubble where everyone knew everyone else's business. Victor was in his mid-40s, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen more than his share of human ugliness. Mrs. Reynolds, he said, shaking Sophia's hand with surprising gentleness. I'm sorry about what you're going through. Thank you. Madison says you might be able to help us. Victor glanced around the coffee shop, automatically cataloging exits and potential threats. I've been following your story in the news. Your husband and his girlfriend made quite an impression. It's not just about the affair, Madison said, sliding a thick folder across the table. We think Derek might have killed his first wife. Victor opened the folder and spent several minutes reviewing the documents Madison had compiled. His expression grew increasingly serious as he read. Elena Vasquez, he said finally. I remember that case. I wasn't involved directly, but the circumstances always bothered me. The investigating officers were convinced it was accidental, but there were some inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? Sophia asked. Elena was an excellent swimmer. She grew up in San Diego and spent most of her childhood in the ocean. The idea that she would accidentally drown in her own pool during the day seemed unlikely. Victor explained that Elena's death had occurred on a Tuesday afternoon while Derek was supposedly at a business meeting. She'd been found floating face down in their infinity pool, with no signs of struggle or foul play. The coroner ruled it an accidental drowning, possibly caused by a seizure or other medical episode. But here's what bothered me, Victor continued. Elena had told her sister the week before that she was afraid of Derek. She said he'd been increasingly controlling and volatile since she filed for divorce. Did the police know that? Her sister tried to tell them, but Derek's lawyers painted her as a bitter in-law trying to cause trouble. Without physical evidence of foul play, there wasn't much the investigation could do. Sophia felt sick. The parallels between Elena's situation and her own were unmistakable. A pregnant wife, a cheating husband, a messy divorce, and fears for personal safety. Can you prove Derek killed her? After 3 years, probably not, but I can prove he's dangerous, and I can make sure he doesn't get the chance to hurt you. Victor's plan was multifaceted. First, he would investigate Derek's current financial situation and business practices, looking for evidence of fraud or illegal activity. Second, he would dig deeper into the circumstances surrounding Elena's death, interviewing people who hadn't been questioned during the original investigation. Third, and most importantly, he would make Derek aware that he was being watched. The key is making him paranoid, Victor explained. Men like Derek are control freaks. When they feel like they're losing control, they make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind that get them arrested? Madison hired Victor on the spot, writing him a check for $50,000 as a retainer. As they prepared to leave the coffee shop, Victor touched Sophia's arm gently. Mrs. Reynolds, I need you to understand something. If Derek is capable of what we think he's capable of, then you're in real danger. I'm going to assign a protection detail to watch your house, but you need to be smart. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't eat or drink anything Derek gives you. And if he suggests a romantic getaway or reconciliation trip, say no. You really think he would try to hurt me? I think he's a man who's killed before and gotten away with it. That makes him very dangerous. As they drove back toward Malibu, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from Derek. We need to talk. I have a proposition that might solve all our problems. Madison read the message and immediately called Victor. He's making his move, she said when Victor answered. Whatever Derek is planning, it's happening soon. That evening, Derek came home with flowers, wine, and the kind of apologetic smile that had once made Sophia forgive anything. But now she saw it for what it was, manipulation. Baby, I know I've been terrible, he said, setting the flowers on the kitchen counter. But I want to make it up to you. To both of you. He gestured toward her stomach. Derek, I think we should separate while we figure things out. That's exactly what I want to talk to you about. I've been thinking, and I have an idea that might work for everyone. Derek explained his proposition with the smooth confidence of a practiced salesman. He would buy Sophia a house in Montecito, away from the media circus in Malibu. She could have the baby there in privacy, with the best medical care money could buy. He would provide full financial support and regular visitation rights. And what about Amber? Sophia asked. Amber and I are over? You were right. What happened between us was inappropriate and hurtful. I want to focus on my family now. It sounded reasonable, even generous. But Sophia had spent enough time with Madison to recognize a con when she heard one. That's very thoughtful, Derek. But I think I'd prefer to stay here for now. Derek's smile faltered for just a second. Sophia, be practical. The media attention here is toxic. Every time you leave the house, there are photographers. That can't be good for the baby. I can handle the photographers. But can you handle the death threats? Sophia's blood went cold. What death threats? Derek pulled out his phone and showed her a series of Instagram direct messages. Graphic, violent threats directed at Sophia from anonymous accounts. Threats to kill her, to hurt the baby, to make her pay for destroying an innocent woman's life. Amber's fans are crazy, Derek explained. Some of them blame you for what happened at the hotel. I'm worried about your safety. The threats were real and terrifying, but something about Derek's timing felt wrong. How convenient that he'd received these messages just as he was trying to convince her to leave town. We should call the police. I already did. They said there's not much they can do about anonymous online threats unless someone actually acts on them. Then I'll hire private security. With what money your influencer income barely covers your personal expenses. Derek was right, and they both knew it. Sophia's social media career, while successful, had never made her truly independent. She'd always relied on Derek's wealth for their lifestyle. The house in Montecito is perfect, Derek continued. Gated community, 24-hour security, completely private. You and the baby would be safe there. And isolated, Sophia thought. Cut off from Madison, from Jessica, from anyone who might help her if Derek decided to finish what he'd started with Elena. I need time to think about it. Derek's mask slipped again, just for a moment, and Sophia saw something cold and calculating in his eyes. Of course, take all the time you need, but don't take too long. These threats are getting worse every day. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Victor Kane called Madison at 7 a.m. with information that made Derek's generous offer look even more sinister. The house in Montecito, Victor said without preamble. It's the same house where Elena Vasquez died. Madison nearly dropped her coffee. Are you sure positive? Derek bought it 6 months after Elena's death, claiming he wanted to preserve her memory. But here's the interesting part. He's been renovating it for the past year. New pool, new security system, new everything. He's been planning this for months. It gets worse. I found the contractor who did the work. Derek specifically requested that the new pool be deeper than the original, with an updated filtration system that would be much more effective at disposing of evidence. Madison felt sick. Derek wasn't just trying to isolate Sophia. He was preparing to murder her in the exact same location where he'd killed his first wife. We need to warn Sophia. Already on my way to her house. But when Victor arrived at the Malibu mansion, Sophia was gone. The housekeeper, a nervous woman named Maria, explained that Derek had taken Sophia to breakfast at their favorite restaurant in Santa Monica. She seemed upset, Maria said in heavily accented English. She was on the phone with you, Senora Madison, and then Senor Derek came home early. He said they needed to talk privately. Madison tried calling Sophia's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried Derek's number with the same result. They could be anywhere, Victor said grimly. Derek knows we're on to him. He's accelerating his timeline. The restaurant in Santa Monica was crowded with the usual weekend brunch crowd, but there was no sign of Derek or Sophia. The hostess remembered them coming in around 9 a.m., but couldn't recall seeing them leave. They seemed to be having an intense conversation, she said. The lady looked upset. Madison's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. If you want to see your sister again, stop interfering. Some things are inevitable. He has her, Madison said, showing Victor the message. Not necessarily. Derek's smart, but he's also arrogant. He might be trying to scare us into backing off. Victor was already working his phone, calling contacts at the LAPD and the FBI. But as he explained to Madison, without evidence of an actual crime, there was little law enforcement could do. We need to find them ourselves. Madison's resources were considerable, but Derek had a head start in the advantage of knowing they were looking for him. For 3 hours, they checked hospitals, hotels, and every property Derek owned or had access to. Nothing. Then Jessica called with news that made Madison's blood run cold. I've been monitoring Sophia's social media accounts, Jessica said. Someone just posted to her Instagram story from her phone. It's a video message. Madison watched the video with growing horror. Sophia appeared to be sitting in a car, looking tired and stressed. She spoke directly to the camera, explaining that she was going away for a few days to clear her head and make some important decisions about her marriage. I know people are concerned about me, Sophia said in the video. But I'm fine. Derek and I are working things out privately, away from all the media attention. I'll be back soon, and hopefully, we'll have some good news to share. But Madison knew her sister well enough to spot the signs of distress. Sophia's hands were shaking slightly, and she kept glancing off camera as if someone was directing her words. She's reading from a script, Madison told Victor. Derek is making her say this, which means he's planning something that requires an alibi. He needs people to think Sophia left voluntarily. The video had been geotagged from a location near the Montecito house, confirming their worst fears. Derek was taking Sophia to the place where he'd killed Elena, and he was creating a digital trail that would support his story when Sophia inevitably disappeared. We need to get there now, Madison said. Wait. Victor grabbed her arm. We can't just charge in. Derek is expecting us to follow him. He wants us to find Sophia's body and call the police in a panic, which will support his narrative that she was unstable and suicidal. So what do? We set our own trap. Victor's plan was risky but brilliant. Instead of rushing to Montecito, they would make Derek think they'd given up. Madison would post on social media about how much she respected Sophia's need for privacy and space. Victor would publicly withdraw from the case, citing lack of evidence and family reconciliation. Derek needs to believe he's won, Victor explained. When he thinks he's safe, he'll make mistakes. The hardest part was waiting. For 6 agonizing hours, Madison sat in her hotel room and pretended to give up on her sister. She posted supportive messages about Sophia's decision to work on her marriage. She even gave a brief interview to Entertainment Tonight, claiming that the family drama had been blown out of proportion by social media. Meanwhile, Victor was quietly positioning his people around the Montecito property, not close enough to be detected, but near enough to intervene if necessary. At midnight, Derek's plan began to unfold. Security cameras that Victor had secretly installed around the property showed Derek's Tesla pulling into the driveway. He got out alone, spent 10 minutes inside the house, and then returned to the car. Where's Sophia? Madison asked, watching the feed on Victor's laptop. Probably in the trunk. The words hit Madison like a physical blow. While she'd been playing social media games and giving interviews, her sister might have been dying. We have to move now. Oh, not yet. He hasn't committed a crime we can prove. If we move too early, he'll claim Sophia left voluntarily and we're harassing him. On the security feed, they watched Derek carry something wrapped in plastic sheeting toward the pool area, something approximately the size and weight of a human body. Now, Madison asked desperately. Now? But as Victor reached for his phone to signal his team, the feed went black. Derek had found and disabled the cameras. They drove toward Montecito in complete silence, both afraid to voice what they were thinking. Madison stared out the window at the dark California landscape and wondered if she was about to become the sister who'd failed to save Sophia's life. When they reached the house, it was completely dark except for the underwater lights in the pool, which cast an eerie blue glow across the yard. Victor's team was already in position, surrounding the property with night vision equipment and tactical gear. Through their earpieces, Madison could hear the whispered communications of professionals preparing for the worst. Movement by the pool, someone reported. Single male figure. Visual on the target. Negative on the female. Repeat. Negative on the female. They were too late. Madison felt her world collapsing as Victor's team prepared to move in. Through her earpiece, she could hear them coordinating their approach to what they all believed would be a crime scene. But just as Victor was about to give the signal, a voice crackled through the radio that made Madison's heart stop. This is Mockingbird. I repeat, this is Mockingbird. Madison grabbed Victor's arm. That's Sophia? That's her voice. Mockingbird had been Sophia's childhood nickname, something only family members knew. If she was using it now, she was trying to communicate something important. Mockingbird, this is Base. What's your status? The eagle has landed, but the nest is still active. Repeat, the nest is still active. Victor looked confused, but Madison understood immediately. Sophia was alive, but Derek wasn't acting alone. There's someone else here, Madison whispered. Sophia's trying to warn us. Through the darkness, they saw movement near the pool house. Not Derek, who was still visible by the main pool, but a second figure dressed in black. Amber, Victor said grimly. She's here to help Derek clean up his mess. The realization changed everything. This wasn't just a jealous husband trying to eliminate an inconvenient wife. This was a coordinated plan between Derek and Amber to murder Sophia and make it look like suicide or an accident. All units, be advised we have two targets, not one, Victor whispered into his radio. Female is armed and dangerous. Madison watched in horror as Amber emerged from the pool house carrying what looked like a bottle of pills and a large bottle of wine. The plan was becoming clear. They were going to drug Sophia and stage a suicide by drowning, just like Elena. But Sophia was still transmitting. The mockingbird knows where the worm is buried, came her voice through the radio. Under the old oak tree, third root from the north. What is she talking about? Victor asked. Madison's mind raced. Sophia was giving them information about something buried under a tree. Evidence, maybe, something Derek thought was safely hidden. She's telling us where Derek buried evidence from Elena's murder, Madison realized. She must have found something in the house. Victor immediately dispatched 2 team members to investigate the tree Sophia had described. If they could find physical evidence linking Derek to Elena's death, they could arrest him for murder, not just attempted murder. Meanwhile, the situation by the pool was escalating. Through night vision scopes, they could see Derek and Amber dragging something toward the water. Something that moved and struggled. She's alive, Victor said with relief. But not for long. We have to move now. 30 more seconds. My team needs to get into position. Those 30 seconds felt like hours. Madison watched as Derek and Amber positioned Sophia at the edge of the pool. Even in the darkness, she could see that her sister was conscious but barely moving, probably drugged. Units in position, came the voice through the radio. Go, go, go. What happened next was chaos orchestrated by professionals. Victor's team moved in from 4 directions simultaneously, using flashbang grenades to disorient Derek and Amber while avoiding injury to Sophia. Madison ran toward the pool as soon as she heard the explosions, arriving just in time to see Derek's face when he realized he'd been caught. You, he said, staring at Madison with pure hatred. You couldn't just let her go. Like you let Elena go. Derek's expression changed to something like respect. You figured it out. Most of it. Sophia figured out the rest. Amber was screaming obscenities as Victor's men restrained her, but Derek seemed almost relieved that it was over. She was going to destroy everything, Derek said, nodding toward Sophia, who was now sitting up with Madison's help. The business, my reputation, my future with Amber. I couldn't let that happen. So you decided to kill her. I decided to solve a problem, just like I solved the Elena problem. The confession was being recorded by multiple devices, but Derek seemed beyond caring about consequences. You want to know the funny part? Derek continued as Victor's men handcuffed him. Sophia's actually tougher than Elena. Elena went quietly, but your sister, he laughed bitterly. Your sister pretended to be drugged and then used her phone to call for help when she thought we weren't watching. Madison looked at Sophia with new admiration. Even drugged and terrified, her sister had been brave enough to coordinate her own rescue. How did you know we were listening? Sophia's voice was weak but clear. Jessica taught me about emergency broadcasting on social media. I figured if I used our childhood code words, you'd pick up the signal. The mockingbird thing. And the tree. I found Elena's jewelry buried there, along with some letters she wrote to her sister. Derek kept them as trophies. Victor's excavation team had indeed found a metal box buried under the oak tree, containing Elena's wedding ring, a bracelet with her DNA still on it, and handwritten letters describing Derek's threats and controlling behavior. That's enough evidence to convict him for Elena's murder, Victor said. Combined with tonight's confession and the attempted murder of Sophia, Derek Reynolds is never seeing the outside of a prison cell again. Synom. As the police took Derek and Amber away, Madison helped Sophia to the ambulance that Victor had called. The EMTs confirmed that Sophia had been drugged with a sedative, but both she and the baby were stable. Is it really over? Sophia asked as they drove toward the hospital. It's over. Derek and Amber are going to prison for a very long time. And the baby is going to grow up knowing that their mother is the bravest person I've ever met. Sophia smiled for the first time in days. I couldn't have done it without my sister. Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. The trial of Derek Reynolds and Amber Sinclair became the most watched criminal proceeding in California since the J. Simpson case. The combination of wealth, murder, betrayal, and social media drama created a perfect storm of public fascination that dominated news cycles for months. Derek was charged with the first-degree murder of Elena Vasquez and the attempted murder of Sophia Reynolds. The evidence against him was overwhelming: Elena's jewelry and letters buried on his property, security footage from the Montecito house showing him and Amber drugging Sophia, and his own recorded confession. Amber faced charges of conspiracy to commit murder, assault on a pregnant woman, and accessory to murder. Her legal team tried to paint her as a victim of Derek's manipulation, but the prosecution had evidence showing she'd been actively involved in planning Sophia's death, including text messages discussing how to make the murder look like suicide. The trial revealed details about Derek's life that shocked even his closest business associates. He had been systematically controlling and abusing both Elena and Sophia, using financial manipulation, emotional gaslighting, and threats to keep them dependent on him. Derek Reynolds is not a man who made a mistake in a moment of passion, prosecutor Sarah Chen told the jury during closing arguments. He is a calculating predator who views women as disposable objects to be eliminated when they become inconvenient. The defense tried to argue that Derek's actions were the result of severe mental illness brought on by financial stress and drug use. But the prosecution countered with evidence showing that Derek had been planning Elena's murder for months before carrying it out, and had begun planning Sophia's death almost immediately after their marriage. This defendant didn't snap, Chen continued. He hunted. He stalked his own wives like prey, gained their trust, isolated them from support systems, and then murdered them when they threatened his carefully constructed facade. Sophia's testimony was the emotional centerpiece of the trial. Despite being 8 months pregnant by the time she took the stand, she spoke with clarity and strength about Derek's psychological abuse and the events leading up to the attempted murder. He made me doubt my own reality, Sophia told the packed courtroom. Every time I questioned his behavior or tried to assert my independence, he would twist it around and make me feel like I was being unreasonable or crazy. When Derek's attorney tried to suggest that Sophia had been an unreliable narrator due to pregnancy hormones and social media addiction, the courtroom erupted in anger. Several women in the gallery had to be escorted out after shouting at the defense table. Madison testified about her investigation into Derek's finances and the discovery of Elena's remains. Her testimony was clinical and devastating, methodically destroying any remaining credibility Derek might have had. My sister trusted this man with her life, Madison said, looking directly at Derek. He repaid that trust by trying to murder her and their unborn child. The most damaging testimony came from Victor Kane, who presented evidence that Derek had been researching methods of untraceable poisoning and had purchased drugs that could induce drowning reflexes. Phone records showed Derek had been in contact with black market pharmaceutical dealers in the weeks leading up to the attempted murder. Derek Reynolds didn't just plan to kill his wife, Victor testified. He planned to kill her in a way that would maximize her suffering and minimize his legal exposure. The trial lasted 6 weeks, but the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Derek Reynolds was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for Elena's murder, plus an additional 25 years for the attempted murder of Sophia. Amber Sinclair received a sentence of 30 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 20. Her OnlyFans account was permanently suspended, and several state attorneys general launched investigations into her role as a recruiter for wealthy investors. Today, justice was served not just for Sophia Reynolds and Elena Vasquez, but for every woman who has been controlled, manipulated, and abused by men who view them as property. Prosecutor Chen said outside the courthouse after the sentencing. Derek showed no emotion as the sentences were read, but Amber broke down completely, sobbing and screaming that she'd been brainwashed by Derek and didn't deserve to go to prison. The judge, a 60-year-old woman named Helen Martinez, had harsh words for both defendants. You have shown a complete disregard for human life and dignity, Judge Martinez said. Your actions have traumatized not just your immediate victims, but their families and everyone who has followed this case. You will spend the rest of your lives paying for your crimes, and that is exactly what you deserve. Outside the courthouse, Sophia faced a crowd of reporters and supporters. At 36 weeks pregnant, she glowed with health and confidence that was a stark contrast to the broken woman who had been slapped in a Beverly Hills hotel bar. I want to thank everyone who supported me through this nightmare, she said, reading from a prepared statement. But most importantly, I want other women who might be in similar situations to know that they are not alone. Abuse takes many forms, and it's never the victim's fault. Madison stood beside her sister, holding her hand as Sophia continued. Derek Reynolds stole years from my life and Elena's life, but he didn't succeed in stealing our futures. Elena's memory will live on through the foundation we're establishing in her name, and my child will grow up knowing that their mother fought back against evil and won. The Elena Vasquez Foundation for Domestic Abuse Prevention launched 6 months later with an initial endowment of $10 million, funded by the settlement Sophia received from Derek's estate and matching contributions from Madison's tech fortune. Sophia's daughter, Elena Rose Reynolds, was born on a sunny Tuesday morning in March, exactly 1 week after Derek's sentencing. At 7 pounds, 4 ounces, she was healthy, beautiful, and completely unaware that her father was a convicted murderer serving life in prison. Sophia had chosen the name Elena to honor Derek's first wife, whose memory had been crucial in securing justice. Rose was for Elena's middle name, creating a connection between the two women whose lives had been forever intertwined by Derek's crimes. She's perfect, Madison whispered, holding her niece for the first time in the hospital room at Cedars-Sinai. And she's never going to know what fear feels like, because we won't let her. The birth had been covered extensively by the media, but Sophia had learned to manage her relationship with public attention. She shared carefully curated moments with her followers while maintaining strict boundaries around her privacy and Elena Rose's safety. Her Instagram following had grown to over 2 million during the trial, transforming her from a lifestyle influencer into an advocate for women's rights and domestic abuse prevention. The Elena Vasquez Foundation had already helped over 500 women escape abusive relationships and had lobbied for stronger laws around financial abuse and digital stalking. "You've built something incredible out of something terrible," Jessica said, visiting the hospital with flowers and a tablet full of media requests. Elena would be proud. Sophia looked down at her sleeping daughter and felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. Derek's conviction had given her closure, but Elena Rose's birth had given her purpose. "I want to show her the world," Sophia said. "All of it, the beautiful parts and the ugly parts and everything in between. I want her to be brave and strong and never let anyone make her feel small." Madison had taken a leave of absence from her tech company to help Sophia adjust to single motherhood. The sisters had grown closer through their shared trauma, developing a bond that was unbreakable. "Have you thought about dating again?" Madison asked gently. Sophia laughed. "Elena Rose is 3 days old. Mad. I think I have plenty of time to figure out romance. I just want you to know that when you're ready, there are good men out there. Men who will love you and support you and never try to control you." "I know, but right now, I have everything I need." The foundation work had introduced Sophia to other survivors of domestic abuse, women who had escaped situations similar to hers. Many of them had become close friends, creating a support network that was both personal and professional. Dr. Sarah Chen, the therapist who had helped Sophia during the trial, had joined the foundation's board of directors. She emphasized the importance of long-term healing for abuse survivors. "Trauma doesn't disappear just because your abuser goes to prison," Dr. Chen explained during one of their sessions. "Recovery is a process, and it's different for everyone." Sophia had been in therapy consistently for 8 months, working through the psychological damage Derek had inflicted. She'd learned to recognize the warning signs of controlling behavior and to trust her own instincts again. "The hardest part," Sophia told Dr. Chen, "is forgiving myself for not seeing the signs earlier. Derek was skilled at manipulation. That's not your fault. I know that intellectually, but emotionally, I still blame myself sometimes. That's normal. The important thing is that you survived, and you're using your experience to help other women survive too." 6 months after Elena Rose's birth, Sophia decided to write a book about her experience. The Perfect Facade: How I Survived My Husband's Attempt to Murder Me became a bestseller within weeks of publication, with all proceeds going to the Elena Vasquez Foundation. The book tour took Sophia across the country, speaking to sold-out audiences about domestic abuse, financial control, and the importance of trusting your instincts. At every event, women approached her with their own stories of abuse and survival. "Your courage gave me the strength to leave," one woman told her after a speaking event in Chicago. "I watched your trial and realized that my husband was using the same tactics Derek used on you." Stories like that made all the pain worthwhile. Sophia had transformed her trauma into a force for good, helping thousands of women recognize and escape abusive relationships. Eleanor Rose was now walking and talking, showing signs of the intelligence and determination that ran in the family. She was too young to understand her complicated family history, but she was growing up surrounded by love and strength. "Mama," Elena Rose said one morning, pointing at a photo of the original Elena on Sophia's desk. "Pretty lady." "Yes, baby. That's Elena. She was very brave, just like you're going to be." Madison had returned to running her tech company but remained deeply involved in the foundation's work. She'd used her resources and connections to expand their reach internationally, helping women in countries where domestic abuse laws were even weaker than in the United States. "We're making a real difference," Madison told Sophia during one of their weekly dinners. "The ripple effects of what you went through are helping women all over the world." "Good. That's all I ever wanted." As Elena Rose's second birthday approached, Sophia reflected on how much her life had changed. 2 years ago, she'd been a trophy wife living a beautiful lie. Now she was a single mother, successful author, and advocate for women's rights, living an authentic life built on truth and purpose. The scars from Derek's abuse would always be with her, but they no longer defined her. She had taken back control of her narrative, transforming herself from victim to survivor to warrior. 3 years after Derek Reynolds was sentenced to life in prison, Sophia stood before a crowd of 5,000 people at the annual Elena Vasquez Foundation Gala. Elena Rose, now a precocious 3-year-old, sat in the front row with Madison, occasionally waving at her mother on stage. "When I first shared my story," Sophia said into the microphone, "I thought I was just trying to survive another day. I had no idea that speaking my truth would create a movement that would help over 10,000 women escape dangerous situations." The foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a way to honor Elena's memory had become a comprehensive organization providing legal aid, financial assistance, temporary housing, and emotional support to domestic abuse survivors across the globe. "But tonight isn't about celebrating how far we've come," Sophia continued. "It's about acknowledging how far we still have to go." She introduced Dr. Sarah Chen, who presented research showing that financial abuse affected 89% of domestic violence survivors, and that women who tried to leave abusive relationships were most at risk of being murdered in the weeks immediately following their departure. "The Elena Vasquez Foundation isn't just changing individual lives," Dr. Chen explained. "We're changing systems, laws, and cultural attitudes that have historically failed abuse survivors." The foundation had successfully lobbied for legislation in 12 states requiring financial institutions to recognize and report signs of financial abuse. They'd also created a smartphone app that helped women secretly document evidence of abuse and connect with local resources. Madison took the stage to announce the foundation's newest initiative, a partnership with major tech companies to develop artificial intelligence tools that could identify potential domestic abusers through their digital behavior patterns. "We can't prevent every tragedy," Madison said, "but we can use technology to identify red flags and intervene before abuse escalates to murder." The crowd erupted in applause. But Sophia knew the real victory wasn't in the technology or the legislation. It was in the faces of the women who approached her after every speaking engagement. Women who had found the courage to leave dangerous relationships because of Elena's story. After the gala, Sophia tucked Elena Rose into bed in their new house in Beverly Hills. It was smaller than the Malibu mansion she'd shared with Derek, but it was filled with love, laughter, and the kind of security that came from authenticity rather than wealth. "Mama, tell me about Brave Elena," Elena Rose said, using her favorite bedtime request. "Brave Elena was a woman who tried to protect herself and her baby from a bad man," Sophia began, using the age-appropriate version of the story she'd developed. "She wasn't able to stay safe, but she left clues that helped other women stay safe. Like breadcrumbs. Exactly like breadcrumbs. And because of Brave Elena's breadcrumbs, many other women and children are safe now. Will I be brave like Elena?" "You're already brave like Elena, sweetheart. You're brave like her, and like Aunt Madison, and like Mama." After Eleanor Rose fell asleep, Sophia sat in her home office answering emails from women around the world who had read her book or heard her speak. Each message represented a life potentially saved, a cycle of abuse potentially broken. One email particularly moved her. It was from a woman in Australia whose husband had tried to poison her after she discovered his affair. The woman had recognized the warning signs from Sophia's book and had secretly recorded evidence before going to the police. "Your story saved my life," the woman wrote. "My husband is now in prison, and my children and I are safe. Thank you for having the courage to speak your truth." Sophia replied to the email, as she did to all of them, offering encouragement and resources. It was time-consuming work, but it felt like the most important thing she'd ever done. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victor Kane, who had become a close friend and occasional security consultant for the foundation. "Saw the news about Derek's appeal being denied. Thought you should know." Derek had spent 3 years filing appeals and trying to overturn his conviction, claiming everything from ineffective counsel to prosecutorial misconduct. Every appeal had been rejected, but Sophia knew he would never stop trying. "Good," she texted back. "How's Amber doing? Still in prison? Still claiming she was brainwashed? Earliest possible parole is in 17 years. Sophia felt no satisfaction in Amber's imprisonment, but she felt relief knowing that another potential predator was off the streets. As she prepared for bed, Sophia reflected on the conversation she'd had with Elena Rose. Her daughter would grow up knowing that her father was a murderer, but she would also grow up knowing that her mother had fought back and won. More importantly, Elena Rose would grow up in a world that was slightly safer because of the work the foundation was doing. She would have access to resources and support systems that hadn't existed when her mother was trapped in an abusive marriage. Sophia's phone displayed dozens of notifications from social media, news outlets, and supporters commenting on the gala. Her story continued to resonate with people around the world, inspiring not just abuse survivors but anyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of injustice. But the most important message was a simple text from Madison. "Proud of you, sis. Elena would be proud too." Sophia smiled and turned off her phone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stories of abuse to address, and new women to help. But tonight, she was simply a mother whose daughter was safe, whose sister loved her, and whose purpose in life was clear. The girl who had once been slapped by her husband's mistress in a Beverly Hills hotel bar had become a woman who slapped back at injustice itself, using her voice and her platform to protect other women from the same fate. Elena Vasquez's death had not been in vain. Derek Reynolds' evil had not triumphed. And Elena Rose Reynolds would grow up knowing that sometimes, when the world tries to break you, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to stay broken. Sophia turned off the lights and headed to bed, ready to dream of the thousands of women who were sleeping safely tonight because she had found the courage to fight back. The perfect facade was gone, but something infinitely more valuable had taken its place: an authentic life built on truth, strength, and the unshakable belief that every woman deserves to be safe, respected, and free. The end. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or visit thehotline.org. Help is available 24/7, and you are not alone. What you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about trust, motherhood, and the people closest to you. This is the security footage from Seattle General Hospital, October 15th, 11:47 p.m. A woman collapses in the maternity ward while another woman stands watching. But here's what will shock you. The woman watching isn't a stranger. She's the business partner who's been sleeping with the dying woman's husband. And she's smiling. Sarah Richardson thought she had it all figured out. A billionaire husband, twin babies on the way, and a future that seemed golden. But while she was fighting for her life in that hospital bed, someone else was systematically stealing everything she loved. Her husband, her children, even her sanity. You think you know where this story's going? You think this is just another affair gone wrong. But what Sarah discovered in those final moments will make your blood run cold. Because the woman who destroyed her family wasn't just a mistress. She was something far more dangerous. Something that had done this before. The DNA test results that saved Sarah's children revealed a truth so twisted, so calculated, that it made headlines across the country. And it started with one simple question that every parent should ask. Who do you really trust with your children's lives? This is a story about a mother's love that reached beyond death itself, about evil hiding behind a helpful smile, and about why you should never, ever ignore that voice in your head that whispers, something isn't right. Stay with me for the next hour, because by the time this story ends, you'll understand why Sarah Richardson's fight became a battle that every parent needs to hear. And if this story makes you think twice about the people in your own life, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear this warning. Subscribe and ring that notification bell because stories like this one could save lives, including yours. Now let me tell you how it really began. In the sterile glow of Seattle General Hospital's security monitor, a woman collapsed in the maternity ward corridor while another stood watching, her lips curved in what could only be described as satisfaction. This moment, captured at 11:47 p.m. on October 15, would later become evidence in one of the most shocking betrayal cases the Pacific Northwest had ever witnessed. But our story begins 6 months earlier, in the glass towers of downtown Seattle, where Sarah Mitchell thought she had everything figured out. Sarah had always been the type of person who planned for everything. As a former emergency room nurse, she understood that life could change in an instant, but she also believed that careful preparation could protect the people you loved. At 28, she had traded her scrubs for the quiet luxury of being the wife of James Richardson, the 35-year-old tech billionaire whose company, Richardson Industries, was about to go public. The morning Sarah discovered she was pregnant with twins, she was organizing James's home office while he traveled to San Francisco for investor meetings. The pregnancy test results lay on his mahogany desk like a small miracle. After 3 years of fertility treatments and devastating losses, her doctor had called it nearly impossible. Yet here was the ultrasound image showing two tiny heartbeats. She called James immediately, her hands shaking as she held the phone. "Twins," she whispered when he answered. "James, we're having twins." The silence stretched so long, she wondered if the call had dropped. "That's incredible, Sarah," he finally said, but his voice carried a strange distance. "Listen, I'm in the middle of something with Cassie and the investors. Can we talk about this tonight?" Cassie. Cassandra Wells had been James's business partner since their Stanford days and now served as chief marketing officer of Richardson Industries. Sarah had met her exactly 3 times in 2 years of marriage, each encounter leaving her with an inexplicable sense of unease. "Of course," Sarah said, swallowing her disappointment. "I love you." "Love you too," he replied, already distracted. That evening, James returned home with champagne and apologies. He swept Sarah into his arms, spinning her around their minimalist living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. "I'm sorry I was rushed today," he said, his blue eyes bright with what seemed like genuine excitement. "This is amazing news. The timing is actually perfect with the IPO launch." Sarah wanted to ask what the IPO had to do with their babies, but James was already talking about nursery designs and the best private schools in Seattle. She pushed down her questions and let herself be carried away by his enthusiasm. The first sign of trouble came 2 weeks later. Sarah was unpacking groceries when she found a small gold earring caught in the couch cushions. It was delicate, expensive, with a distinctive pearl drop that she had never seen before. She held it up to the light, studying the craftsmanship. When James came home, she showed him the earring. "Any idea where this came from?" she asked, keeping her voice casual. James barely glanced at it. "Probably fell out of one of the bags from your shopping trip. You know how those department stores are with their samples." But Sarah hadn't been shopping. She had been on bed rest for the past week due to early pregnancy complications. "James, I haven't left the house in days." His expression shifted, becoming almost defensive. "Sarah, you're being paranoid. Maybe the cleaning lady dropped it. Maybe it was there from the previous owners. Does it really matter?" The word paranoid hit her like a physical blow. In all their time together, James had never dismissed her concerns so curtly. "I guess not," she said quietly, slipping the earring into her pocket. That night, as James slept beside her, Sarah lay awake thinking about the earring and about Cassie Wells, whose image she had seen in countless business magazines alongside James. She thought about the way Cassie had looked at her during their brief meetings, with eyes that seemed to catalog every flaw. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her sister Emma in Portland. "How are you feeling? Any morning sickness?" As Sarah typed her response, she heard James's phone vibrate on his nightstand. In the blue glow of the screen, she could see a message preview. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. The presentation will be perfect. Iuani." It was 1 in the morning. Sarah's heart began to race, but she forced herself to stay still. There could be a dozen innocent explanations. Cassie was a workaholic. Time zones were confusing when you traveled constantly. Business partnerships required constant communication. But deep in her chest, a cold certainty began to form. Something was very, very wrong. The next morning, James surprised Sarah with breakfast in bed and an announcement that made her forget all about midnight text messages. "I've cleared my schedule for the rest of the week," he said, setting down a tray with fresh strawberries and cream. "I think we should take a baby moon before things get too crazy with the twins." Sarah's face lit up. "Really? But what about the IPO preparations? Cassie can handle the investor meetings. She's been pushing for more responsibility anyway." James sat on the edge of the bed, his hand resting gently on Sarah's still small bump. "This is more important. You're more important." The relief that flooded through Sarah was so intense, it brought tears to her eyes. This was the James she had fallen in love with, the man who had once driven 4 hours to surprise her during a difficult shift at the hospital, the one who remembered that she liked exactly 2 sugars in her coffee and always bought the organic strawberries because the regular ones made her feel guilty. They spent 3 perfect days at a boutique resort on Whidbey Island. James turned off his phone except for emergencies and devoted himself entirely to Sarah. They walked on the beach, planned nursery themes, and talked about names. Sarah felt the cold knot of suspicion in her chest begin to dissolve. On their last evening, as they watched the sunset from their private deck, James pulled out a small velvet box. "I know we're already married," he said, "but I wanted to give you something to commemorate this moment, our family beginning." Inside was a delicate necklace with 2 intertwined hearts, each containing a tiny diamond. "One for each baby," he explained, fastening it around her neck. Sarah was crying now, overwhelmed by love and relief. "I'm sorry I've been so emotional lately. The pregnancy hormones are making me crazy." "You haven't been crazy," James said firmly. "You've been perfect." That night they made love with a tenderness that reminded Sarah why she had married him. As she drifted off to sleep in his arms, she felt more secure than she had in months. The feeling lasted exactly 18 hours. Sarah woke up at 3 a.m. with cramping that sent ice through her veins. At 24 weeks pregnant, any pain was cause for concern. She shook James awake, trying not to panic. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "We need to go to the hospital." The emergency room at Seattle General was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. Sarah's blood pressure was dangerously high, and the twins' heart rates were showing signs of distress. Dr. Martinez, the attending physician, spoke in the calm but serious tone Sarah recognized from her own nursing days. "We're seeing early signs of preeclampsia," he explained. "At this stage, we need to monitor you very closely. I'm admitting you for observation." As Sarah was wheeled to the maternity ward, James walking beside her gurney, she saw a familiar figure standing near the nurse's station. Cassie Wells, dressed in an elegant gray suit despite the early hour, was speaking quietly with one of the doctors. "Cassie?" Sarah called out weakly. "What are you doing here?" Cassie turned, her expression instantly morphing into one of concern. "Oh, Sarah, thank God you're okay. James called me when you were in the ambulance. I came as soon as I could." Sarah looked at James in confusion. "You called her?" "She was my emergency contact for business issues," James explained quickly. "When I grabbed my phone to call the hospital, I accidentally hit her number instead of my assistant's. She insisted on coming." It was a reasonable explanation, but something about Cassie's presence felt wrong. The woman looked too composed, too prepared, as if she had been expecting this crisis. "I should let you rest," Cassie said, moving closer to the bed. "But I wanted you to know that everything at the office is handled. James doesn't need to worry about anything except taking care of you and the babies." She placed a perfectly manicured hand on Sarah's arm, and Sarah noticed that Cassie was wearing the match to the earrings she had found in her couch. "Thank you," Sarah managed to say, though her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. As Cassie left, promising to check in soon, Sarah caught sight of something that made her blood run cold. In the brief moment when Cassie hugged James goodbye, Sarah saw the woman's expression change. The mask of concern slipped, revealing something that looked almost like triumph. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to convince herself she was seeing things. The pregnancy, the medication, the stress, they were all making her paranoid. But when she opened her eyes again, Cassie was still watching her through the doorway, and she was definitely smiling. 3 days into Sarah's hospital stay, the routine had become almost comfortable. James arrived every morning with coffee for himself and herbal tea for Sarah. He worked from the chair beside her bed, taking calls and reviewing documents while she dozed or read pregnancy books. The monitors showed the twins were stable, and Dr. Martinez was cautiously optimistic about managing the preeclampsia until they reached a safer gestational age. Then Cassie started visiting. It began innocuously enough. She brought flowers and magazines, claiming she was in the hospital anyway, for a board meeting with the hospital's CEO about a potential partnership with Richardson Industries. She asked thoughtful questions about Sarah's condition and admired the ultrasound photos taped to the wall. But Sarah began to notice things. Small things that individually meant nothing but together formed a disturbing pattern. Cassie knew which nurse was assigned to Sarah's care before Sarah herself did. She had opinions about Sarah's medications that seemed unusually informed for someone with no medical background. Most unsettling of all, she had begun referring to the twins in a possessive way that made Sarah's skin crawl. "How are our little ones doing today?" Cassie would ask, her hand hovering over Sarah's belly, as if she had the right to touch. "They're not your babies," Sarah wanted to scream, but the words never came. Instead, she would smile weakly and make some non-committal response about feeling fine. On Thursday evening, Sarah's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. Her blood pressure spiked to dangerous levels and the twins showed signs of distress. Dr. Martinez made the decision that Sarah had been dreading. "We need to deliver tonight," he told her and James. "At 28 weeks, they have a good chance. But every hour we wait increases the risk to all three of you." James went pale. "Are you sure there's no other option?" "I'm afraid not. We'll do everything we can, but you need to prepare yourselves for a difficult fight ahead." As the medical team prepared for an emergency cesarean section, Sarah felt a strange calm descend over her. She had delivered enough premature babies during her nursing career to know the statistics, the challenges, the long road ahead. But she also knew that babies born at 28 weeks could thrive with proper care. "They're going to be okay," she told James, squeezing his hand as they wheeled her toward the operating room. "They're fighters." The surgery itself was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, but she heard the most beautiful sounds in the world. Two thin, angry cries announcing her children's arrival. "Twin A is a boy, 4 pounds 2 ounces, she heard someone announce. "Twin B is a girl, 3 pounds 14 ounces. Both babies are breathing on their own." Oliver and Emma, Sarah thought through the haze of medication. She had chosen the names months ago, but hadn't told anyone, wanting to keep something precious for herself. When Sarah woke up in recovery 6 hours later, James was sitting beside her bed, his eyes red with exhaustion and emotion. "They're beautiful," he whispered. "So small, but the doctors say they're strong. They're in the NICU, but you can see them as soon as you're stable enough to be moved." Sarah tried to sit up, desperate to see her children, but waves of dizziness forced her back down. "Soon," James promised. "Dr. Martinez said probably this afternoon." "Have you held them?" Sarah asked. James nodded, tears in his eyes. "Oliver grabbed my finger and wouldn't let go. And Emma, she has your nose." For a moment, the joy overwhelmed everything else. They had done it. Despite all the complications and fears, their babies were here and alive. Then Cassie walked into the recovery room. "I hope you don't mind," she said softly. "James asked me to come. He thought you might want to know that I've taken care of everything at the office. You two don't need to worry about anything except your family." Sarah blinked slowly, struggling to process through the fog of painkillers. "That's thoughtful of you. I also took the liberty of calling your sister Emma to let her know about the babies. She's driving up from Portland and should be here this evening." Something about that felt wrong, but Sarah couldn't put her finger on what. Through the haze, she heard Cassie continue talking. The NICU staff is absolutely wonderful. I spent some time with Oliver and Emma while you were sleeping. They're such perfect little angels. Sarah's eyes snapped open. You've seen my babies. James thought it would be helpful to have an extra pair of eyes while he was with you, Cassie explained smoothly. I wanted to make sure they were getting the best possible care. Sarah looked at James, who suddenly seemed unable to meet her eyes. You let her see them before me? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, but the hurt in it was unmistakable. Sarah, you were unconscious, James said quickly. Someone needed to be there, and Cassie volunteered. I thought you'd want someone you trusted to check on them. But Sarah didn't trust Cassie. She never had, and she certainly didn't now. The woman had inserted herself into the most intimate moment of Sarah's life, had seen her children before their own mother could. I want to see them now, Sarah said, struggling to sit up despite the pain. The doctor said you need to rest a few more hours, Cassie said gently. The babies are sleeping anyway. I promise they're in excellent hands. Sarah looked from Cassie to James and saw something that made her heart sink. They were united in their concern for her, presenting a solid front of gentle authority that completely excluded her from decisions about her own children. This was only the beginning. By Friday morning, Sarah was strong enough to be wheeled to the NICU. Her first sight of Oliver and Emma took her breath away. They were impossibly tiny, their bodies dwarfed by the incubators that surrounded them with warmth and life-sustaining equipment. But they were perfect, and they were hers. Sarah spent the entire day beside their incubators, talking softly to them and learning their personalities. Oliver was restless, constantly moving his small hands and feet. Emma was quieter but more alert, her dark eyes seeming to track Sarah's voice. For the first time since her hospitalization began, Sarah felt completely at peace. That peace lasted until James returned from a quick trip home to shower and change clothes. How are they doing? He asked, settling into the chair beside Sarah's wheelchair. Perfect, Sarah said simply. Dr. Kim says they're ahead of the curve for 28-weekers. Their breathing is strong, and they're already trying to suck. James smiled, but Sarah noticed it didn't quite reach his eyes. That's wonderful news. Is everything okay? You seem distracted. James hesitated, then pulled out his phone. I got a call from Dr. Martinez while I was at home. He wants to discuss your recovery timeline. What about it? Apparently your blood pressure is still unstable. He's concerned about postpartum complications. Sarah frowned. My blood pressure was fine this morning. The nurse said it was the best reading they'd had since I was admitted. That's not what Dr. Martinez told me, James said quietly. He said there might be some memory issues from the medication. It's not uncommon with severe preeclampsia. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Memory issues? James, I feel fine. I remember everything clearly. I know you do, sweetheart, but the doctor is concerned that you might not be accurately assessing your own condition. Before Sarah could respond, Cassie appeared in the NICU doorway. She had been visiting daily, always with some thoughtful gift or helpful gesture that Sarah couldn't object to without seeming ungrateful. I hope I'm not interrupting, Cassie said softly. I brought some lactation supplies that I thought might be helpful. Sarah watched as Cassie produced an expensive breast pump and collection kit. That's very thoughtful, but the hospital provides equipment. Oh, this is much better quality, Cassie assured her. I did quite a bit of research on premature infant nutrition. The pump you use can make a significant difference in milk production and quality. Sarah felt a familiar unease at how much Cassie seemed to know about her specific situation. Thank you, but I think I'm fine with what the hospital recommends. Of course, Cassie said smoothly. I just want to help however I can. These little ones are going to need every advantage. As if summoned by her voice, Dr. Martinez appeared at Sarah's wheelchair. Mrs. Richardson, I'm glad I caught you. I wanted to discuss your discharge timeline. When can I go home? Sarah asked eagerly. I want to be able to visit the babies without having to coordinate with the nursing staff. Dr. Martinez exchanged a glance with James that didn't escape Sarah's notice. I'm afraid we need to extend your stay for observation. Your blood pressure readings have been inconsistent, and we're seeing some concerning patterns in your lab work. What kind of patterns? Sarah demanded. I feel fine, better than I have in weeks. Sometimes patients with severe preeclampsia experience a false sense of recovery, Dr. Martinez explained patiently. Your body has been through significant trauma. We need to be very careful about monitoring for complications. Sarah looked around the group of concerned faces and felt a creeping sense of isolation. I want to see my lab results. Of course, Dr. Martinez said. I'll have them sent to your room this afternoon. But when Sarah returned to her room, there were no lab results waiting. When she asked the nurse, she was told that Dr. Martinez had decided to wait until morning to review them together. That evening, as Sarah tried to process the day's confusing events, her sister Emma arrived from Portland. "Oh, Sarah!" Emma cried, rushing to embrace her. "I got here as fast as I could. How are you feeling?" "Confused," Sarah admitted. "Everyone keeps telling me I'm sicker than I feel." Emma pulled back to study her sister's face. "You look tired, but you don't look sick. What exactly are the doctors saying?" Sarah explained about the blood pressure concerns and memory issues. As she talked, she watched Emma's expression grow increasingly troubled. "Sarah, I've been a paramedic for 8 years. I know what severe preeclampsia looks like, and you don't have it. Not anymore." "That's what I think too, but James and Dr. Martinez seem convinced that I'm not thinking clearly." Emma's frown deepened. "Where is James now?" "He went to dinner with Cassie, something about finalizing the IPO presentation. On the day his twins were born?" Emma's voice was sharp with disbelief. Sarah felt a stab of hurt that she had been trying to ignore. "He's been under a lot of pressure with the company going public." "Sarah, listen to me carefully," Emma said, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed. "Something doesn't feel right about this situation. That woman, Cassie, she's been way too involved in medical decisions that should be between you and James." "I know," Sarah whispered, "but James trusts her completely. If I say anything negative about her, he acts like I'm being irrational." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "I think we need to get a second opinion on your medical condition, and I think we need to do it without James or Cassie knowing." That night after Emma left, Sarah lay awake thinking about her sister's words. She thought about the earring, the late-night text messages, Cassie's unusual knowledge of medical procedures, and James's increasingly distant behavior. But mostly she thought about the look in Cassie's eyes when she talked about the twins. It wasn't the fond concern of a family friend. It was something else entirely. Something that looked disturbingly like ownership. The second opinion came from Dr. Elena Vasquez, Emma's former supervisor at Portland General, who reviewed Sarah's medical records as a personal favor. Her assessment was delivered via a secure phone call that Emma took in the hospital parking garage. "There's absolutely nothing in these records to justify extended hospitalization," Dr. Vasquez told Emma bluntly. "Sarah's blood pressure normalized 48 hours post-delivery. Her lab values are completely normal. If I were treating her, I would have discharged her yesterday." Emma felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. So why would her doctor be telling her otherwise? "I can't speculate about another physician's motives, but I can tell you that keeping a healthy patient hospitalized against medical necessity is grounds for review by the medical board." Armed with this information, Emma marched back into the hospital determined to get answers. She found Sarah in the NICU, sitting beside the twins' incubators with tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" Emma demanded, rushing to her sister's side. "They won't let me hold them," Sarah sobbed. "Dr. Martinez says my blood pressure is too unstable, that the stress of skin-to-skin contact could be dangerous for me and the babies." Emma's anger flared. "That's complete nonsense. Skin-to-skin contact actually helps stabilize blood pressure and heart rate." "That's what I thought too, but everyone keeps telling me I'm confused." James agreed with Dr. Martinez. "He said we need to follow medical advice, even if it feels wrong." Emma looked around the NICU and spotted Cassie standing near the nurse's station, engaged in what appeared to be a very friendly conversation with the head nurse. As Emma watched, Cassie handed the nurse an envelope that looked suspiciously like a generous tip or donation. "Sarah, I need to tell you something," Emma said urgently. "I had Dr. Vasquez review your medical records. According to an independent expert, there is no medical reason for you to still be in this hospital." Sarah's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I mean someone is lying to you about your condition, and I have a pretty good idea who." Before Sarah could respond, James appeared beside them, Cassie close behind. "What's going on here?" James asked, noticing Sarah's tears. I was just telling Sarah about my conversation with Dr. Vasquez, Emma said defiantly. James's expression darkened. You went behind our backs to get medical opinions from someone who hasn't even examined Sarah? Someone who doesn't have a vested interest in keeping her here? Emma shot back. What's that supposed to mean? Cassie interjected, her voice perfectly modulated to sound shocked and hurt. Emma turned to face her directly. It means I think you've been manipulating this entire situation from the beginning. The accusation hung in the air like a live wire. Sarah watched the faces around her, seeing James's anger, Cassie's wounded innocence, and Emma's fierce protectiveness. Emma, that's enough, James said coldly. I think you should leave. I'm not going anywhere without my sister. Your sister is exactly where she needs to be, Cassie said softly, under medical supervision, with people who care about her and the baby's well-being. People like you. Emma's voice dripped with sarcasm. Yes, like me, Cassie replied, moving closer to James in a gesture that looked both protective and possessive. I've been here every day, making sure Sarah has everything she needs while James handles the business responsibilities that support this family. Sarah watched this exchange with growing horror. She could see the way Cassie positioned herself as the reasonable, supportive partner, while Emma was painted as the hysterical, interfering sister. Worse, she could see that James was buying it completely. Maybe Emma should take some time to cool off, James suggested, his arm moving almost automatically around Cassie's shoulders. The gesture was so casual, so natural, that Sarah knew immediately it wasn't the first time. These two people were comfortable touching each other in a way that spoke of intimacy beyond business partnership. James, Sarah said quietly, how long have you been sleeping with her? The question dropped into the conversation like a bomb. James's face went white, then red. Cassie's mask of concern slipped for just a moment, revealing something calculating and cold. Sarah, you're being ridiculous, James stammered. The medication is making you paranoid. Am I? Sarah's voice was gaining strength. Because right now you're standing there with your arm around another woman while your wife sits in a hospital bed and you're acting like it's perfectly normal. James dropped his arm as if Cassie had suddenly caught fire. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Sarah demanded. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Emma moved closer to Sarah's wheelchair, presenting a united front against whatever was about to be revealed. Finally, Cassie spoke. Sarah, I think you're under a lot of stress right now. The premature birth, the hormones, the medication, it's all affecting your judgment. You're seeing threats where there aren't any. The only threat I see is you, Sarah replied steadily. Cassie's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, and for a moment Sarah saw something that made her blood run cold. It was the look of someone who had been playing a long game and was getting tired of pretending. I think, Cassie said carefully, that we need to discuss what's best for everyone involved, including the babies. The way she said it, with a subtle emphasis on everyone, sounded distinctly like a threat. Sarah looked at James, searching his face for any sign that he understood what was happening, but his expression was closed off, protective of Cassie rather than his wife. That night, after Emma reluctantly left and James went home, Sarah lay in her hospital bed staring at the ceiling. She could feel everything she had built her life around crumbling beneath her, but she still couldn't see the full scope of what she was up against. She wouldn't understand the true depth of Cassie's plan until it was almost too late. 2 days later, Sarah was finally discharged from the hospital, but the victory felt hollow. The twins would remain in the NICU for at least another month, and Sarah's visits were now restricted to specific hours due to what Dr. Martinez called infection control protocols. It was a policy that somehow didn't apply to Cassie, who continued to visit freely as James's designated business associate. Back in the penthouse apartment she shared with James, Sarah felt like a stranger in her own home. The nursery they had carefully planned together had been completely redesigned during her hospital stay. The soft pastels and whimsical animal themes she had chosen were gone, replaced by a stark, modern aesthetic in grays and whites that looked more like a high-end showroom than a space for babies. Cassie thought the original design might be too stimulating for premature infants, James explained when Sarah questioned the changes. She consulted with some experts on infant development. I would have liked to be consulted too, Sarah said quietly. They're my babies. Our babies, James corrected. And you were in the hospital. Decisions had to be made. Sarah walked through the apartment, cataloging the other changes. Fresh flowers appeared daily, but they were expensive arrangements that looked professional rather than personal. The refrigerator was stocked with organic, artisanal foods that Sarah had never purchased. Even the coffee had been upgraded to a blend that Sarah didn't recognize. Cassie's been helping with the household management, James explained when Sarah mentioned the changes. She thought you'd appreciate coming home to everything being organized. It was thoughtful and invasive and completely characteristic of how Cassie operated, always just helpful enough that objecting would seem ungrateful. That evening, as Sarah sat in the redesigned nursery trying to feel some connection to the space where her children would eventually sleep, she heard James on the phone in his office. The conversation was muffled, but she caught fragments that made her stomach clench. "She's getting suspicious," James was saying. "Maybe we moved too fast with some things." A pause then. "I know you're trying to help, but Sarah's not stupid. She's starting to ask questions I can't answer." Another pause, longer this time. "No, I don't think she knows for sure, but Emma is pushing her to dig deeper." Sarah crept closer to the office door, her heart pounding. "What do you mean, handle Emma?" James's voice had taken on a sharp edge. "Cassie, we agreed to keep this simple." Sarah pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear more, but James's voice dropped too low to make out the words. When the conversation ended a few minutes later, Sarah hurried back to the nursery, her mind racing. "Handle Emma? Keep what's simple?" The fragments of conversation painted a picture that Sarah didn't want to believe but couldn't ignore. The next morning, Sarah woke up to find James already gone and a note on the kitchen counter. "Emergency investor meeting. Cassie will drive you to the hospital for your visit with the twins. Jay." Sarah crumpled the note, fury rising in her chest. She was perfectly capable of driving herself to see her own children. The fact that James had arranged for Cassie to escort her felt like another small erosion of her autonomy. But when Cassie arrived, she was carrying 2 coffee cups and wearing an expression of genuine warmth that caught Sarah off guard. "I thought you might want some of that lavender honey latte from the place near the hospital," Cassie said, offering Sarah one of the cups. "I know how much you've been craving decent coffee." It was exactly the drink Sarah had been wanting, and she found herself touched by the gesture, despite her suspicions. "Thank you. That's really thoughtful." During the drive to the hospital, Cassie was the perfect companion, sympathetic about the stress of having babies in the NICU, knowledgeable about the latest research on premature infant development, and full of encouraging stories about preemies who had thrived. "I've been doing a lot of reading," Cassie explained as they walked through the hospital corridors. "I want to be as helpful as possible during this difficult time." Sarah felt her guard dropping slightly. Maybe she had been too quick to judge. Maybe the stress of the situation was making her paranoid about someone who was genuinely trying to help. That feeling lasted until they reached the NICU. Sarah's usual routine was to check in with the nurses about the twins' overnight progress, then settle in for several hours of talking to them, reading aloud, and providing pumped breast milk. But today, when she approached Oliver's incubator, she found a woman she didn't recognize sitting in the chair beside it. The woman was young, probably in her 20s, wearing scrubs that identified her as a NICU nurse. She was holding a bottle and feeding Oliver with a competence that spoke of experience. "Excuse me," Sarah said politely. "I'm Oliver's mother. Is there a reason he's being bottle-fed instead of receiving breast milk?" The nurse looked up with surprise that seemed genuine. "Oh, Mrs. Richardson. I'm sorry, I was told you wouldn't be in until this afternoon." "Ms. Wells brought the bottles this morning and said you had approved the supplementation." Sarah felt the world tilt slightly. "Ms. Wells brought bottles?" "Yes, she's been very involved in the feeding schedule. She explained that your milk production had been insufficient and that you wanted to try a high-calorie formula to help the babies gain weight faster." Sarah turned to look at Cassie, who was standing behind her with an expression of helpful concern. "I thought we discussed this yesterday," Cassie said smoothly. "You were worried about your milk supply, and I researched the best options for supplementation." "We never discussed that," Sarah said slowly, "and my milk supply is fine." The nurse looked between them uncertainly. "I can check the chart for the authorization." "That won't be necessary," Cassie said quickly. "I think there's just been some confusion about timing. Why don't we let Sarah take over the feeding now?" But when Sarah reached for the bottle, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. The lavender honey latte, she realized with growing horror. Cassie had drugged her coffee with something that was making her dizzy and disoriented. "Sarah, are you feeling all right?" Cassie asked with perfect concern. "You look pale." "I'm fine," Sarah managed, but her voice sounded slurred even to her own ears. "Maybe you should sit down," the nurse suggested, moving towards Sarah with professional alarm. "You don't look well." Sarah wanted to explain what was happening, but the words wouldn't come. The room was spinning, and she could feel herself losing the ability to think clearly. "I think we should call Dr. Martinez," Cassie said, already reaching for her phone. "Sarah's been having episodes like this since the birth. The doctors are concerned about postpartum complications." As Sarah felt consciousness slipping away, she heard Cassie speaking to someone on the phone. "Yes, she's disoriented again, confused about conversations we've had, making accusations that don't make sense. I think she needs to be readmitted for evaluation." The last thing Sarah saw before everything went black was Cassie's face leaning over her, and the expression on it was no longer helpful or concerned. It was victorious. Sarah woke up in a psychiatric evaluation room at Seattle General, restrained to the bed with soft cuffs that nonetheless made escape impossible. The walls were beige and featureless, except for a single window with reinforced glass. A camera in the corner tracked her every movement. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the psychiatrist on duty, sat in a chair just out of Sarah's reach, reviewing a thick file that Sarah realized with growing horror was about her. "Mrs. Richardson, I'm Dr. Chen. How are you feeling?" "Confused," Sarah said honestly. "Why am I here? Where are my babies?" "You're here because you had another episode of disorientation and paranoid thinking. Your husband and Miss Wells brought you in after you became agitated at the hospital and made threatening statements toward the nursing staff." Sarah's blood ran cold. "I never threatened anyone. I was drugged. Cassie put something in my coffee." Dr. Chen made a note in the file. "Can you tell me about your relationship with Miss Wells?" "She's trying to steal my life," Sarah said, then immediately regretted how crazy it sounded. "In what way?" Sarah took a breath, trying to organize her thoughts despite the fog that still clouded her mind. "She's having an affair with my husband. She's been manipulating my medical care to keep me away from my children. She's been feeding my babies without my consent and telling the staff that I'm mentally unstable." "These are serious accusations," Dr. Chen said neutrally. "What evidence do you have to support them?" "I heard James on the phone talking about handling my sister Emma. I saw them touching each other intimately. I found Cassie's earring in my house before I was even hospitalized." As Sarah spoke, she could see Dr. Chen's expression becoming more concerned, but not concerned for Sarah's safety, concerned about Sarah's mental state. "Mrs. Richardson, according to your medical records, you've been experiencing increasing paranoia and confusion since your children's premature birth. This is consistent with postpartum psychosis, a serious but treatable condition." "I don't have postpartum psychosis," Sarah said desperately. "I have a husband who's having an affair and a woman who's trying to take my children. Your husband seems very concerned about you. He's been here every day during your previous admissions, and he's provided detailed accounts of your increasingly erratic behavior at home." Sarah felt the trap closing around her. Every genuine concern she had raised had been reframed as evidence of mental illness. Every attempt to protect herself and her children was being used as proof that she was unfit to care for them. "Where is James now?" Sarah asked. "He's meeting with social services about temporary custody arrangements for the twins while you receive treatment." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Temporary custody? They're my children." "Mrs. Richardson, your children are premature infants who require specialized care. Given your current mental state, the priority has to be their safety and well-being." "I would never hurt my children," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "I believe that," Dr. Chen said gently. "But your perception of reality has been compromised. You need treatment before you can safely care for infants." The door opened and James walked in, his face a mask of concerned sadness that Sarah now recognized as completely artificial. "How is she?" he asked Dr. Chen. Still experiencing paranoid delusions, but she's responsive to questioning." James approached the bed cautiously, as if Sarah might attack him. "Sarah, sweetheart, I need you to understand that we're all trying to help you. Where are Oliver and Emma? Sarah demanded. They're safe. They're being well cared for. By whom? James exchanged a glance with Dr. Chen. The hospital staff, and Cassie has been helping coordinate their care while I handle the legal arrangements. Legal arrangements? For their guardianship while you're in treatment. It's temporary, just until you're better. Sarah understood now. This was the endgame. Cassie had maneuvered James into a position where he would willingly sign over custody of his own children to protect them from their supposedly unstable mother. And once that happened, Sarah would have no legal standing to fight for them. James, please listen to me, Sarah said, forcing her voice to remain calm and rational. I know how this looks, but Cassie has been drugging me. She's been manipulating both of us. If you sign custody papers, you'll never get the children back. Sarah, you're sick, James said sadly. Cassie has been nothing but supportive through this entire crisis. She's sacrificed her own time and energy to help our family. She's been planning this from the beginning, Sarah insisted. The affair, getting close to you, learning about my medical history, positioning herself as the responsible alternative when I was painted as unstable. James's expression hardened. Enough. I can't listen to these delusions anymore. He turned to Dr. Chen. What's the timeline for treatment? With medication and therapy, we typically see improvement in 4 to 6 weeks. However, given the severity of her symptoms and the presence of newborn infants, I would recommend a longer observation period to ensure stability. Whatever it takes, James said firmly. I won't risk my children's safety. As James left the room, Sarah called after him desperately. James, please, just ask yourself one question. Who benefits if I'm declared mentally incompetent? But he was already gone, and Sarah was alone with the crushing realization that Cassie had won completely. She had James's trust, legal access to the children, and Sarah safely locked away as a diagnosed mental patient whose word would never be believed against hers. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah felt true despair. She had lost everything, and worse, she had lost it to someone who had planned every move with ruthless precision. 3 weeks into Sarah's involuntary psychiatric hold, Emma made a discovery that would change everything. Emma had been relentless in her pursuit of the truth, hiring a private investigator named Marcus Torres and digging into Cassie Wells's background with the determination of someone who knew her sister was in danger. What she found was more disturbing than even Sarah's worst fears. Cassandra Wells didn't exist before 5 years ago. The woman who had inserted herself into James's business and personal life was actually Catherine Walsh, a former pharmaceutical sales representative who had been fired from 3 different companies for falsifying medical credentials. Before that, she had been Carol Winters, who had been investigated but never charged in connection with the sudden death of an elderly patient whose will she had influenced him to change in her favor. But the most shocking discovery came when Emma traced the medical care Sarah had received during her hospital stay. Dr. Martinez, the physician who had insisted on keeping Sarah hospitalized despite her improving condition, had received a substantial donation to his research fund from a shell company that Emma's investigator traced back to Cassie. The psychiatric evaluation that had landed Sarah in involuntary commitment had been requested by Cassie, not James, using forged documentation that suggested she had medical power of attorney. Armed with this information, Emma contacted the one person she thought might help. Dr. Maya Patel, Sarah's former supervisor from her nursing days, who now worked as a patient advocate specializing in medical abuse cases. Dr. Patel reviewed the evidence with growing alarm. This is systematic medical manipulation, she told Emma during a late-night meeting in her office. If what you're telling me is true, your sister has been the victim of an elaborate scheme to declare her mentally incompetent and steal her children. Can we prove it? Emma asked. The falsified medical records alone are grounds for criminal charges. But we need to move fast. If James signs permanent custody papers, it becomes much harder to reverse. The next morning, Dr. Patel arranged for an independent psychiatric evaluation of Sarah by Dr. Jonathan Reed, a forensic psychiatrist with experience in cases involving medical manipulation. Dr. Reed's examination was thorough and revealing. Mrs. Richardson shows no signs of postpartum psychosis or any other psychiatric disorder, he reported to Dr. Patel and Emma. Her accounts of events are consistent, detailed, and rational. The symptoms documented in her previous evaluations are consistent with someone who has been administered psychoactive drugs without consent. Blood tests confirmed the presence of benzodiazepines and other sedatives in Sarah's system, drugs that had never been prescribed for her postpartum care. But even with this evidence, getting Sarah released required navigating a complex legal system that was biased toward protecting medical professionals and existing custody arrangements. Emma filed emergency motions and contacted the state medical board, but bureaucracy moved slowly while Cassie moved quickly. On a Friday afternoon, Emma received a call that sent her into a panic. James had filed papers to formally adopt the twins as a single parent, claiming that Sarah had abandoned them by refusing treatment for her mental illness. Cassie was listed as the proposed caregiver and co-guardian. "They're moving the adoption hearing to Monday," Emma told Dr. Patel frantically. "If this goes through, Sarah will lose all parental rights." "Then we need to get her out of there this weekend," Dr. Patel said grimly. The plan they developed was risky but necessary. Dr. Patel used her credentials to request a medical transfer of Sarah to an outside facility for specialized testing. During the transfer, which would take place on Sunday morning, Sarah would instead be taken to Dr. Reed's office for documentation of her actual mental state and preparation for Monday's custody hearing. Emma spent Saturday night preparing Sarah for what might be their only chance to save her family. "You need to understand," Emma told her sister during visiting hours, speaking in code they had developed as children. "The snow is melting on Monday morning." Sarah understood. Emma had found a way to get her out, and they had one chance to expose Cassie before it was too late. But as Emma left the psychiatric facility that night, she didn't notice the figure watching from a car in the parking lot. Cassie had been monitoring Emma's visits, and she had her own plans for Monday morning. Plans that would require Sarah to never make it to the custody hearing at all. The game was entering its final phase, and Cassie was prepared to do whatever it took to win. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching Sarah's mood as she prepared for what she hoped would be her escape from the psychiatric facility. The medical transfer was scheduled for 9 a.m., and Emma had managed to communicate that Dr. Reed would be waiting instead of the transport team. But at 8:30, Dr. Chen appeared at Sarah's door with an unexpected visitor. "Mrs. Richardson, your husband is here to see you before your transfer." James walked into the room looking haggard and uncertain, nothing like the confident businessman who had dismissed Sarah's concerns weeks earlier. Behind him, inevitably, was Cassie, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit that made her look like she was dressed for a funeral. "Sarah," James began, his voice heavy with what sounded like genuine emotion, "I wanted to see you before the hearing tomorrow." "What hearing?" Sarah asked carefully, not wanting to reveal that Emma had already told her about the adoption proceedings. "The custody hearing. I filed for sole custody of the twins while you receive treatment." "With Cassie as co-guardian, I assume?" James flinched at the bitterness in her voice. "She's been incredible through all of this, Sarah. She's been taking care of them when I can't be there." "How convenient for her," Sarah said, watching Cassie's face for any reaction. For just a moment, Cassie's mask slipped, revealing something cold and calculating. But it was gone so quickly that Sarah wondered if James had noticed it at all. "I know you think I'm sick," Sarah continued, "but I need you to answer one question honestly. Do you love her?" The question hung in the air between them. James looked at Cassie, then back at Sarah, and for the first time in weeks, his expression was completely open. "I think I do," he admitted quietly. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I never meant for this to happen." "And when did it start?" Sarah pressed. "Before or after you found out I was pregnant?" "Does it matter?" Cassie interjected smoothly. "The important thing is what's best for the children now." "It matters to me," Sarah said, her eyes never leaving James's face. James was quiet for a long moment. "It started about 6 months ago. When we found out about the twins, I panicked. The responsibility felt overwhelming, and Cassie was there to help me think through everything." "Help you think through what, exactly?" "Whether I was ready to be a father, whether our marriage was strong enough to handle the stress, whether you and I wanted the same things for our future." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "And what conclusion did you reach?" "That maybe we got married too quickly," James said painfully. "That maybe we weren't as compatible as we thought." Cassie moved closer to James, her hand resting on his arm in a gesture of support that looked natural and practiced. James has been struggling with these feelings for months, Cassie said gently. The pregnancy crisis just forced him to confront some difficult truths about your relationship. Sarah stared at them, seeing clearly for the first time how masterfully Cassie had manipulated the situation. She had taken James's normal anxiety about becoming a father and transformed it into doubt about his marriage. She had positioned herself as the wise counselor, helping him work through his feelings, all while systematically undermining his wife. You planned this from the beginning, Sarah said to Cassie. The affair was just the first step. Sarah, you're being paranoid again, James said tiredly. Am I? Sarah stood up from the bed, feeling strength returning to her voice. Let me tell you what I think happened. Cassie seduced you when she found out I was pregnant because she saw an opportunity. A tech billionaire with newborn twins and a conveniently unstable wife who could be painted as mentally ill and removed from the picture. That's enough, Cassie said sharply, her composure finally cracking. She's been drugging me, James. She's been bribing medical staff. She's been manipulating my care to make me seem unstable while positioning herself as the responsible alternative. You're delusional, Cassie snapped, then seemed to realize how harsh she sounded. I'm sorry, but this is exactly the kind of paranoid thinking the doctors are concerned about. Sarah smiled grimly. Then you won't mind if we test that theory. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small recording device that Emma had smuggled to her during yesterday's visit. Sarah, what are you doing? James asked nervously. Playing back a conversation I recorded 3 days ago, Sarah said, pressing play. Cassie's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. The psychiatric hold has to be extended through the custody hearing. If she's released before then, she might convince James to change his mind. I've already talked to Dr. Chen about adjusting her medication to ensure she remains symptomatic. The silence that followed was deafening. James stared at the recording device as if it might bite him. There's more, Sarah said quietly. Would you like to hear the part where she discusses how much money she'll have access to once the adoption is finalized? Or the part where she talks about selling the twins to her contacts in international adoption if you become inconvenient? James's face had gone completely white. That's not possible. Play it, Cassie said desperately. Let him hear the full context. You're twisting my words. But Sarah could see in James's eyes that he was finally seeing the truth. The woman he had fallen in love with, the woman he had trusted with his children, was a predator who had been playing a long game with his family as the prize. Security is going to be here any minute, Sarah said calmly. Emma called them 20 minutes ago with evidence of medical fraud, falsified documents, and attempted kidnapping. The question is whether you're going to stand with your wife and children or with the woman who's been destroying our family for months. James looked at Cassie one last time, searching her face for some explanation that would make sense of everything he had just heard. What he saw there was pure, undisguised hatred. You stupid, weak man, Cassie snarled. You have no idea what you're throwing away. And with that, the mask came off completely, revealing the monster that had been hiding underneath. The sound of security guards and police officers entering the psychiatric facility echoed down the hallway as Cassie's carefully constructed world collapsed around her. Emma burst through the door moments later, followed by Dr. Patel and a King County detective who had been investigating Cassie's background. Catherine Walsh, Detective Rivera said, reading from an arrest warrant, you're under arrest for medical fraud, identity theft, falsification of medical records, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Cassie's transformation was complete. Gone was the polished, helpful businesswoman who had charmed her way into the Richardson family. In her place stood a woman whose eyes burned with rage and desperation. You have no idea what you're dealing with, she hissed at Sarah as the handcuffs clicked into place. I've done this before, and I'll do it again. You can't protect them forever. Actually, I think I can, Sarah replied calmly, because now everyone knows who you really are. As Cassie was led away, still screaming threats and profanities, Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway looking shaken and confused. Mrs. Richardson, I owe you an enormous apology, she said. Dr. Martinez and I have been reviewing your real medical records with the independent experts Dr. Patel brought in. It's clear that your care has been compromised from the beginning. Sarah felt a wave of vindication so strong it almost brought her to her knees. "What happens now?" "Now you go home to your children," Emma said, wrapping her sister in a fierce hug. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. Dr. Martinez lost his medical license and faced criminal charges for accepting bribes and falsifying medical records. The psychiatric hold was immediately lifted, and all of Cassie's actions on behalf of the Richardson family were declared legally void. But the most important moment came when Sarah was finally reunited with Oliver and Emma in the NICU. They had grown during her forced absence, becoming stronger and more alert, but they still recognized her voice immediately. "They knew you were their mother," the head nurse told Sarah as she finally held her son and daughter properly for the first time. "Every time that woman tried to feed them or interact with them, they would cry. But they're calm with you." James stood beside the incubators looking lost and ashamed. "Sarah, I don't know how to apologize for what I've done." "You don't," Sarah said quietly, not looking up from Emma's tiny face. "You just do better from now on. Can you forgive me?" Sarah was quiet for a long time, considering the question. "I don't know yet, but I'm willing to try, for their sake." It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. James moved into the guest room while they worked through months of couples therapy. Sarah struggled with trust issues and PTSD from her ordeal, but slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild their family on a foundation of honesty and genuine communication. The twins thrived. Oliver grew into a confident toddler who reminded Sarah of James at his best. Emma became a quiet observer who seemed to understand everything around her with startling clarity. 6 months after Cassie's arrest, Sarah started a nonprofit organization called Medical Truth, dedicated to helping patients who had been victims of medical manipulation and fraud. The organization's first major case involved exposing a network of corrupt doctors and fake patient advocates who had been systematically defrauding elderly patients. "Every victory for justice makes the world a little safer," Sarah told a reporter during an interview about the organization's work. "And sometimes the people who hurt us end up teaching us how to protect others." James threw himself into supporting the organization, using his business connections and resources to expand its reach. It became a way for him to atone for his failures and to honor the strength Sarah had shown during their darkest time. As for Cassie, she was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison after additional victims came forward. The investigation revealed that she had been running variations of the same scheme for over a decade, targeting wealthy men with young children and vulnerable wives. On a sunny afternoon 2 years after her arrest, Sarah was working in her garden while the twins played nearby when Emma called with news. "She's appealing her sentence," Emma told her. "Her lawyers are claiming she was mentally ill and not responsible for her actions." Sarah watched Oliver chase butterflies while Emma sat in her stroller, babbling happily to herself. "Let her appeal," Sarah said peacefully. "The truth doesn't change just because someone wants to deny it." And that, Sarah reflected as she ended the call and returned to her garden, was the most important lesson she had learned through her ordeal. The truth had power, even when it was buried under lies and manipulation. Sometimes it took time to emerge, and sometimes good people made terrible mistakes while searching for it. But in the end, the truth always found a way to the surface. As Oliver ran to her with a handful of dandelions and Emma clapped her hands in delight, Sarah felt the deep satisfaction of a mother who had fought for her children and won. Not just against Cassie, but against the systems and people who had tried to convince her that her own perceptions couldn't be trusted. She had learned to trust herself again, and that was perhaps the greatest victory of all.